here we go.
For the first couple of years of my life after high school,
That
I
voice
made most of my money
caught me off
working on
guard.
one of the farms just outside of my town in Tennessee. Unlike a lot of the farms in the area around me that were typically horse and cattle ranches, the one that I worked at grew a lot of the fruits and vegetables that got shipped to the local grocery stores. At first, when I worked there, I mainly did manual grunt work. But after my second year, I got certified to drive some of the machinery around. And then finally, in
Promotion.
my last year working on the farm, I was given the task that I always envied. I got to drive the combine harvester and begin bulk harvesting the crops. I'm not sure why, but this was always something I wanted to do. And the only time we ever got to use it was toward the beginning and middle of the fall. That year, it was finally my turn, and I couldn't have been more excited. I didn't even mind the cleaning that I had to do beforehand. You see, we had a major bird problem at the farm, so one of the many tactics we used to deter them was by placing scarecrows around the fields. And when we did that, we set them up so that we could break them down and move them when it came time to harvest, so that we didn't have to maneuver them around.
It's gonna be a
This
person.
meant that before driving the combine harvester around, I had to go to each of the fields and remove the scarecrows and anything that we didn't want to get destroyed in the process. So the day before getting to the harvest, I spent most of my time breaking down the scarecrows. At first, everything was going well. The first couple of scarecrows broke down as easy as we had intended them to. But once I was more toward the middle of the field, I reached one that wouldn't budge. You see, we had designed it so that you could pull the post apart, and in the process, the hay stuffing scarecrow would fall down, and then we could untie them and drive them into the storage area. But for some reason, this one post wouldn't come apart. I took a closer look at the section of the post that we were supposed to pull apart, and to my surprise, it looked like this one had been superglued together. This was odd, but I ended up assuming that it kept falling apart, so the other workers secured it with superglue for the season. Boy, was I wrong. After a couple of frustrating moments of me trying to pull the post apart, I decided to just dig the center post out of the ground and then knock it over. As I began digging, I noticed that some of the ground around the post appeared to be a bit darker than the rest, almost like the dirt had been stained by something. I just wasn't sure what it was at the time. It wasn't until I got the scarecrow down that I figured it out. After digging, I pushed the post over, and the scarecrow came toppling down. I was surprised by the amount of force it sounded like when the scarecrow's body hit the ground. When we made them, I remember thinking that they were usually light, so I was curious as to why this one seemed so heavy. After further inspection, I quickly knew that I needed to notify the police. After walking over to the limp scarecrow, I could tell that something looked different about it. And as I began to move it around, I knew right away that this wasn't stuffed with hay. Underneath the sack that we used to make the head was an actual body. I called the police and notified my boss about what I had found. And oddly enough, my boss didn't respond. It wasn't long before the police arrived, and I escorted them to the scarecrow that I had suspected was a body. And after they checked it out, they confirmed that what I found was actually one of my old coworkers. There was one of our farmhands that got up and quit one day, or at least that was what we thought when he stopped showing up. But it turned out that he was murdered, and somebody had stashed his body among the scarecrows, hoping that he wouldn't have been found.
So that's stupid if you know that they take the
stab wounds in his back
and
torso,
they take the scarecrows
and they
down.
linked those to the cause of his death. What made things even crazier was that the investigators and the police weren't able to get in contact with my boss, and hasn't been seen since I texted him about the body.
Boss did it.
We found out later that the worker that was murdered was actually having an affair with our boss's daughter. And because my old boss couldn't be found, he is presumed to be the number one suspect in the murder, and they believe he is in hiding. If there is one thing that I took away from that job, is that a body is a lot heavier than it seems. I'll never forget the
dead
feeling
weight.
of it in my hand as I went to check what it really was.
That boss is stupid. Like, you know they take the scarecrows down. Why
In the
would you
tree
put it up
trimming
as a
business,
scarecrow?
fall is probably our busiest season. Whether it's people who are afraid of dead tree limbs falling onto their homes, or those who just don't like the sight of them in their yard, the fall season is when all the calls come in, and we are usually spread the thinnest. This meant that, while I was working as a trimmer, in the fall, I was almost always on jobs by myself. And that was fine, but you can only take so many precautions and still get the job done when you are solo, which is why I'll never be able to work as a trimmer again. What happened was, I got sent out on a typical job that saw me removing some branches from a tree that were getting too close to one of the telephone poles in front of a homeowner's lawn. This typically wasn't a big deal. I would just harness myself up in the tree and then take my small chainsaw and start cutting away. So when I got to the job, I got all my equipment out, made sure that I was secured into my harness, and there was nothing directly below the tree that could damage by falling branches, and then I began making my way up the tree. I secured myself in the proper height, about 17 feet off the ground, and began figuring out which order I should cut the branches in. And once I got it down, I started up my chainsaw and began cutting away. I got through about 4 branches before I knew there was a problem. After the 4th branch fell, I felt a tug on my harness, and I figured it was loose. So I went to power down the chainsaw so that I could resecure myself. And just at that moment, the harness didn't slip, but it snapped.
Ooh.
I was thrown backward and down from the tree.
Damn.
And on the way down, all I could think of was to throw the saw away from me because it was still running.
Oh, shit.
Before I could do that, though, my back slammed into one of the lower branches in the tree and the saw fell right out of my hand. I continued to fall, and as soon as I hit the ground,
tell me
I
you
knew
fell
that
on
I
the
was in
saw.
trouble. I could feel the saw digging into my leg and tearing through my flesh as I literally laid on top of it. I tried my best to push myself up and roll over off the saw, but by that point, the damage was already done. I had never seen that much blood in my entire life. And it wasn't long after I separated myself from the saw that everything went dark and I passed out.
Ooh, you lost a lot of blood real quick.
The homeowner was home, and they actually rushed me to the hospital themselves. I woke up in the hospital bed with only 1.5 legs left. I had to get my right leg amputated from the knee down. The saw managed to cut through the bone and most of the flesh, but in a very choppy way that they couldn't reattach it. There was too much damage
not from a
done.
chainsaw,
Surprisingly enough, I still work for the same company. Only now I'm in the deployment department, and I make sure that everyone is fully equipped with good gear and multiple employees per job.
Something like that. Damn, I hate this. Ever since I updated my computer to Windows 11, my mouse has been real choppy. Like, it lags. That happened, was it last year? You cut a tree down. Well, I contacted the city or the village that I live in, and to cut down a tree in my backyard. Well, it's technically not in my backyard. It's in the just on the other side of the fence. So technically, it's the that little area. It's like a little area where the village owns, and then from the highway, from that area, then up to the highway, the state or the highway owns, I think, or something like that, because they're the ones who cut like the grass out there. But they got someone to cut the tree down, and I happened to be standing in the kitchen, and one of the guys, he was up all the way up at the top. I usually go to start cutting. They cutting from the top down. Something happened. I don't know what happened. All I saw was I was looked outside, saw him up in the tree. I looked away for a second or two. I don't know. I heard, whoa! And I looked back out. this dude's hanging. His harness didn't break. His harness caught him. He's hanging and like just swinging, and he was able to like grab a hold of the tree and, and pull himself back up. But I was like, man, he'd have fell, especially that chain link fence down there. He fell on that, or all that, all them shrubs and broken limbs and trees, stumps out there. Ooh, that would have been from that height. I felt a vibration. I didn't nothing on my phone, but yeah, it was something like that. So his harness, caught him.
The last camping trip of the year is always a bittersweet feeling. It's sad because, as an avid camper, it's the last time I get to go camping for the next couple of months. But at the same time, it's a beautiful experience because by that time, the leaves have all fallen from the trees, and the air is nice and cool. Honestly, the middle of autumn is my favorite time to be out in the woods. It's just beautiful. That is, until all the noises come out at night. I'll never forget that last camping trip that I went on in '07. It was terrifying. For the most part, when I go camping, I tend to go with my younger brother, and sometimes our uncle would tag along. In 2007, the three of us decided to make our way from South Jersey up to the Schwangunk area of New York and went to one of the campgrounds that happened to be owned by a family friend. There were no cabins or anything on the campgrounds. It was simply a plot of land with a lot of forest on it that they would allow people to camp in as long as you paid for parking. We had only been to that area twice before, but this time was particularly awesome because, from the looks of the parking lot, we were the only ones camping that weekend. We unloaded our gear from the car and began what turned out to be about a 4-mile hike into the woods. After walking for about 2 hours, we found a little spot that we thought looked perfect for our campsite.
Okay, good. I thought he was talking about they went 4 hours into the woods, but they went 2 hours. It's 4 hours total. Walk in and back.
But during that time of year, you can't help but enjoy the sound of all the crunching leaves around you. But what makes the leaves really helpful is something that we learned that evening. The sounds can alert you when something is walking around near you. You see, after getting our tent set up, we quickly got a fire going and began making some mac and cheese and hot dogs that we had packed for our first meal of the weekend. And considering the fact that we were out here in the middle of October, the sun had already gone down by the time we had finished cooking our dinner. After eating our dinner, we all spent some time by the fire and then ended up deciding to head to bed early. Falling asleep outdoors was never an issue for me, and that night proved no different. My brother and I were in one tent, and our uncle was in his own, but it wasn't long before we could all most likely be heard snoring. I'm unsure how long I was asleep, but I remember waking up from a dream to the feeling of someone shaking me. I opened my eyes to see my brother, who had been sitting up and shaking me awake. When I looked over at him, he told me that he heard something outside. At first I was confused, but then I heard the sound that he was talking about. You could clearly hear the sound of leaves crunching under the pressure of someone or something's feet. I looked at my brother, who was visibly shaken from fear, and I tried to calm him down by explaining that it was most likely just our uncle using the bathroom, but he swore that he didn't hear him leave his tent. The sound of the leaves crunching began making its way around the outside of our tent, and I immediately figured that it was our uncle trying to scare us. So I called out to him. "Nice try," I said. "We aren't 10 anymore." But to my surprise,
my
horror, groaned from inside his tent as he was woken up by me talking, and I'm certain he must have heard the noises too, because he quickly called out asking if we were okay. Before I could respond to him though, we were both cut off by the sound of a deep growling noise.
Bear.
"Stay in the tent," my uncle yelled out to us, which he then followed up by making a lot of loud noises and banging his belongings around his tent to make noise. We could hear whatever it was outside running away from our camp thanks to the leaves. And immediately my uncle got out of his tent and came into ours to check on
Oh,
us.
they got a
He said that he
gun?
thought it might have been a bear and that it shouldn't bother us anymore. And as if the bear was listening, all of us froze as we heard the footsteps once again closer to our camp. We all sat in silence as they began walking around our tent once again. And this time, the animal got close enough that my uncle and I could hear its breathing through its nose as if it were sniffing the side of our tent. Whatever it was stayed at our campsite for about an hour, circling our tent before it finally ran off. The three of us ended up waiting until sunrise and then decided that we needed to leave. We quickly packed up everything that we had and began walking back to the car. My uncle had a can of bear mace that he was carrying in his hands.
Oh, well, at least they got
but
bear
thankfully,
mace.
we didn't run into anything on the way back to the car. We did, however, spot a set of massive tracks about halfway up the trail that we assumed could only have come from the bear that we encountered the previous night. They seemed fresh too, and considering hibernation season was coming up, we are lucky that it wasn't looking for food at that particular moment.
I was just curious. Yeah, that's one thing about camping that always kind of scares me. When you, just the animals. So I'm like, you gotta have a gun or something. You can't be like he had bear mace, something like you can't be out there with just I got a knife. Like nah, that ain't enough. Like I need a rifle or like a handgun or something. Like like I need something. Can't be out there with no damn be out there with no damn or nothing, or a knife, and then they get you going. Oh, I could just like you gonna do something fucking Steve Seagal shit with a knife. Oh, I need to watch that movie again. Under Siege. I've been planning on reacting to that. Like, this dude has a knife. He just cut his goddamn arms. Like, what you doing? But yeah, I remember when I was a kid, I was in a forest preserve. I was walking through the woods, and you could hear it in fall. You could hear the leaves crunch and stuff like that. And then it's like I could hear like leaves crunching when I wasn't walking, so I stopped, and I was looking around. This is broad daylight. It was nighttime, and I could hear leaves crunching. And I was like, and me being, I'm like, how old was I? Because we was still living in Chicago at the time. So I had to be under the age of 12. But, of course, old enough to where I could walk and then be out by myself with my family. So I probably was 8 or 9 years old. And I just heard crunching. And I'm like, that's a human walking. like I fucking, I can tell from the leaves, the way the leaves are crunching. That's a human walking. And I remember looking around and I couldn't see anything moving, but I could still hear it. But it was faint too. It was like whatever it was far away. And for some reason, I just took off running. And they had a trail in there, but I walked off the trail. End up running and jumping over there's this big branch in the walkway, like blocking the walkway. End up jumping over. Somehow my back foot got caught. And it had rained, I think, the night before or the day somewhere before. Fell flat, got mud all right here. This land, and there's a big puddle of mud and water. And got all my hands, shit like that. So, and I didn't want to get in trouble. Cause my dad, but like, why you get mud all over you? So I'm walking and I'm looking and I got some like leaves and I'm just trying to wipe stuff off. My dad's because it wasn't enough to get the damn mud off me. Like all the mud off me. He's like, did you? I said, I tripped and fell. And he was like, boy, and he got some paper towels. He always carried paper towels in his car. Yeah, yeah, I just feel like I feel like this too on my forearm. Oh man, I don't know why I get so spooked. I just start running. Don't even know what direction it's coming from. Just take off. But anyway, hope you all enjoyed my reaction. And when if you did, make sure you hit that thumbs up button down below. Make sure to subscribe and hit that bell. Leave a notification. Comment down below. Share this video. I'll see y'all next time. Peace.